Hey guys, welcome to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So today we're back with our second installment of Wild Rift Fundamentals, and we're going to be covering a topic that I've wanted to cover honestly for a couple of months now, ever since I came up with the idea of the Wild Rift Fundamentals series, which is how to improve and climb. So in the background we have a Xayah game from, I believe this was in April or May, when I reached Emerald. So this was my last promo match, where if I won this match I reach Emerald, and if I lost this one I would have to go for yet another promo match. So it's a really exciting match, and yeah, I will not spoil the match, but you can just see the match in the background as I'm talking about my points. So first up, the first thing I want to say is that honestly, improving and climbing, there are a lot of overlaps in the tips, and honestly, as far as I'm concerned, they're roughly the same thing, because if you're improving, you will naturally get better at the game and you will naturally climb. So overall, there are mostly overlapping points, but first I'm gonna cover the main points for improving, then I'm gonna be covering climbing. So first point that I want to cover on improving is having a learning mindset. So now a lot of people say that the best way to improve, even like challenger players, they tell you that the best way to improve is to just play more games, just keep playing more games, just practice more. But that may not necessarily always be true, because some things you do get better with a lot of games, but what you do need to do is have a learning mindset when you are playing those games. Having an improving mindset, learning and improving mindset when playing those games. Now, what do I mean by that? For example, if you just like blindly queue up into matches non-stop and you just autopilot through the matches, you're not really gonna learn anything, and probably you're gonna get frustrated and angry at the game or yourself. So what you want to do is you want to go into the match with a goal in mind of something to improve, especially if it's a non-ranked match, but even in ranked matches this can still be the case. So for example, if I'll give you guys a personal example of what I was doing. Last time when I first started playing the game, I wasn't really used to warding, so very often I would have two wards stacked up and unused. So I would go into games with the mindset that, oh, I have to learn how to ward, I have to use my wards, and of course I'm not just dropping them in random locations. Honestly, doing that is better than having two wards in your pocket. So I was thinking, okay, I gotta ward at good spots, I gotta ward the river, I gotta ward the enemy bush, I gotta ward the tri-bush. So I was actively trying to find windows of opportunity to place my wards. Like after I clear a wave, I place a ward, then I'm back, or after I clear a wave, I place a ward, then I go back to farming the next wave. So it's actively finding ways to improve my warding. And also, I'm also still doing this now. So even now, I always have the problem of not using my cooldowns. I'm being very greedy with my cooldowns, being my flash, my barrier, my Zhonya's. So a lot of the times I'll hold on to it at the last moment, and when I'm like 1 HP, I try to press my barrier but I still die. So that is being very greedy, and while that is not necessarily wrong, it's definitely an area for improvement where it is definitely better to use earlier than later. Same thing with the Zhonya's. Sometimes you're already dead to rights. There's no point in popping your Zhonya's because you're going to die anyway. So it's better to just use it earlier to avoid the main bulk of the enemy's damage and to use it late into the fight. These are still areas that I'm currently trying to improve now, and every match that I go into I'm thinking, okay, I can't be too selfish with my barrier, but at the same time I don't want to just randomly use it. So this is what I'm referring to. So of course playing more games is helpful, but you gotta play games with the mindset of improving yourself and learning something new. So the other couple of minor points I would say is watching YouTube videos or reading guides. Now there are things that you would never know just by playing by yourself, or you have to find out to know, and you wouldn't know otherwise. For example, if let's say you play Camille, or you're learning Camille, you may not necessarily know that you can press W while you're hookshotting towards someone. So you might only find out in a guide, or you might only find out in a YouTube video. It's very unlikely that you already know that that is a thing, and if you do, you probably found it out either through like a friend who plays Camille, or through a YouTube video, or through a guide. So it's very unlikely you'll find out yourself, unless like one time when you're panicking and you're pressing E, then you just mash your W and you realize, wait a minute, I can do that. Then you might figure it yourself. But the point here is that a lot of things you may not necessarily figure out yourself. So a lot easier way of improving on that is to simply just watch videos. And other than like micro skills, like these videos can also teach you macro, like people who make videos, not necessarily even me. I do this, but a lot of other YouTubers do that too, is like explaining their macro decisions, like here, oh, enemy team is going for dragon, there's no way we can contest, so we're going to push the opposite side tower instead and trade a tower for a dragon, kind of thing. So there, you can also learn micro and macro from watching YouTube videos or reading guides. And also another thing you can do is VOD reviews. So of course, this is not a very popular thing to do, but it is really helpful, which is after you play a game, even if it's a winning game or a losing game, we all make mistakes in generally almost all of our games. Rarely do we have like a flawless game where there's completely no mistake. Sometimes you don't necessarily die or don't necessarily screw up micro, but let's say your team was fighting in mid while you're just sitting at the top lane, just farming the minions, not generally doing anything useful. So that in itself could have been a mistake. So there definitely are things you can learn. So you might want to VOD review, take a look. Is there any macro decisions you could have made better? Is there any micro decisions you could have made better? Like, oh, if I flashed the Akali E, I could have won the 1v1 against the Akali kind of deal. So definitely VOD reviewing is helpful. Of course, that does take time. So I do recommend you go at like 1.5 times speed. Or even faster if you can take in the information, but don't go like over 2 or 3 because you won't really be able to see what's happening because things are going way too fast. And other than that, is to learn your character's itemization properly, or learn all of the items in the game properly for that matter. So Wild Rift, you know, this is prior to patch 2.4. I'm recording this right before patch 2.4. I'm gonna release this on the day that the new season is starting. So as of now, there is still quite little number of items in the game. Of course, they're gonna add like, I believe, like nearly 20 new items in the game and reworking some. So this will still apply when we get to that stage, which is to learn what every item in the game does and learn what kind of item choices you have as a character. So if you're playing like a tank, you should know what kind of tank items you should be building from the match. You shouldn't be blindly building based on your default build or just randomly buying items. Obviously, that's not the way to go. Itemization is a really important, integral part of the game that you need to know. And I do have a guide on tank itemization, so I'm gonna link that up in the top. That is actually the first episode of Wild Rift Fundamentals. But even on every single character like AD Carry, normally you have 2 or 3 core items, and your last few items are either you can rotate them around, like for example Mortal Reminder and Guardian Angel. Normally you can rotate them around, or you can even sub in like a Death's Dance. You gotta see the situation. Sometimes, very rarely, you might even want to build a tanky item like Maw of Malmortius, or even a full tank item, although that's really rare, but it still there are still situations where that will be the case. So you always want to know all your items very well. This will also let you know your enemy well, because if you look at the scoreboard and you see, oh, the enemy Malphite has a Bramble Vest, you know he's going to inflict grievous wounds on you. So that is something you want to take into account when fighting them, and of course item power spikes and so on. So you want to understand items properly. So these are my main points for improving. Now I'm going to move a little bit more onto actually climbing and ranking up. Of course, as I said before, just a reiteration is that generally these points overlap. If you improve, you're going to climb. If you're climbing, you're probably improving, unless you're like getting carried by your team every single game, which is unlikely because it will stop sooner or later. So my first point is to main one role. So there are of course 5 unique roles in the game. And in my opinion, it's the best way to climb is just to focus on one role, because if you are playing all 5 roles, you have a lot of things to learn. Every character has a unique set of skills that you need to know. For example, if you're playing AD Carry, you gotta learn very important skills like positioning, farming up in the early game, and carrying your team in the late game, of course. Then if you're like a support, you have to focus on healing, shielding your team, supporting your team in general. How can you help your team? You have to focus on the enemy team. You have to focus on your own team to know how you can, better aid your team. And mid laners, you have to learn how to rotate top, rotate bot. Junglers have to learn their pathing, their jungle matchups, which lanes to gank, which lanes are ungankable, when you should gank, taking objectives, learning how to smite properly. And top laners have to learn things like split pushing, how to tank for the team properly if you're a tank, and especially intensive 1v1s in the top lane, so gotta be mechanically good. So of course, majority of these points are translatable to other teams. Like, just because you're an AD carry doesn't mean you can split push. So there are applicable to other roles as well. However, every role has its own unique nuances, and if you're really serious about climbing, you should only be maining one role, or at very most 2 roles, because there's no way anybody can master like and be really really good at 5 roles at the same time. I mean, of course it is possible, but if you're learning to climb, and you're not like a challenger, so that wouldn't be you. So you should focus on 1 to 2 roles to climb with. And tying into that point is to have a to have good champion mastery and a good champion pool. So what do I mean by champion mastery? I don't mean like the level 1 to level 7 masteries that you can flash in the game if you have like level 5, 6, or 7 mastery. I mean how good you are at your champion. So you want to be good at least 3 champions. So that's having like a champion pool. So I recommend 3 champions in one role, and 1 to 2 champions in another role. So for example, I play AD carry. So for example, I know how to play Xayah, Ezreal, Kai'Sa. So I know how to play these 3 champions really well. I understand all the nuances of the champion, and I know all of like the small tips and tricks, like things that people wouldn't necessarily know. Like for example, Xayah, I know how to do the fastest root combo, which is to W auto Q E, which is not something that everybody would know. Some people might do Q auto E instead and not use their W. So you gotta know all these small things. Or like on Ezreal, I know that if I get hooked by a Blitzcrank, if I react fast enough and I press my E, I can cancel Blitzcrank's hook, or so-called tank his hook, without actually getting hooked. So you need to know, mechanically, you need to know your character very well, and you need to be able to play your character very well, or your 3 characters for that matter. And aside from that, you also have to know all their item breakpoints, all their item power spikes. For example, on Ezreal, you're not necessarily very strong in the early game, but when you hit your Triforce, you're gonna have power spike. When you evolve your mana mutant to your Mirror Mana, you're gonna power spike. For Kai'Sa, when you get your BF Sword, your Molar Reminder, and your Longsword, you're gonna get your Q evolve. That's your power spike. You gotta understand when you can fight, when you can't fight. Understand your character's damage, how much damage your character can do, how much damage your character can take. Is this 2v3 winnable with my character at this stage of the game? You gotta understand all these sort of things. Of course, you won't get it right every single time, but you got to have a more or less good understanding of your character. That is the first step to the game, because the game, of course, has many factors like map awareness, taking objectives, split pushing, warding, so on and so forth. So the moment you have like character mastery, you have one aspect of the game sort of you don't really have to handle it in the game itself, which is character mastery. That's one of the points that you have to take into account in games. Is champion mastery. So if you have your champion mastery down, it's fine. And also, of course, having a champion pool of 3 champions in your main role. So for example, my example, AD carry, the most strong character that I want to use, or champion I should say, that I want to use now is Kai'Sa. But if Kai'Sa gets picked by the enemy team, or if she gets banned, of course now there are bans in patch 2.4 and above in ranked, I can of course go to Xayah or Ezreal. So I always have 3 options for my main role, and of course you also want to have options for your secondary role. So let's say if, for example, my secondary role is mid lane, so I would generally recommend that you pick characters that are similar to characters that you play. So for example, if I play mid lane, I'm likely to play characters like Corki or Lucian, who are AD carries, or not, I would say AD carries, they are marksmen who can be played mid. But even if I don't get those characters, which I already know how to play from playing the AD carry role, not my top 3 main champions, but I do know how to play them, I can also pick Orianna. So Orianna is my backup champion for the mid lane. So mid lane is my secondary pick. So I have actually learned how to play Orianna properly, and I can actually play Orianna in ranked, and I have done it a couple of times when I got filled mid. And it's not a very good idea to pick a AD carry in the mid lane. So I had no choice but to pick Orianna to round out my team comp for the utility and for the AP. So I had to pick Orianna. So you want to have like a good secondary champion. So for me, my core champions Kai'Sa, Xayah, Ezreal, and my secondary champion Orianna for my second role. So you might want to have like a backup champion for a second role, because for example, if enemy team picks Orianna, I might be in trouble. So you might want to have a secondary champion for your secondary role, but the most important is the 3 champions for your primary role. So with that said, I have a Orianna guide that I will link up in the top if you guys want to check out. I did do a video on her some time ago, which is mostly still applicable. And now we're going to move on to the next point, which is understanding what every champion does and what they want to do. Now, there are a few ways to understand this. Either you read guides, you read their skill descriptions, or you simply just get destroyed by them and you realize, oh, this ability does this. So for example, the first time you play against Camille, you may not know what her ultimate does. It's just like a box. You try to flash out of the box, you try to walk out of the box, it doesn't work. Then you're like, oh, this thing just traps me in the box. Or rather in the hexagon, I should say. So it just traps you in there. So another way is to just read about it, but generally you want to understand what every single champion wants to do, every single champion, what every single champion's ability is. Now I did this the hard way. I don't recommend this everybody doing this, but this is what I did before I ever started playing rank. When Wild Rift first released on patch 1.0, I played at least 3 matches of every single character in the game in normals before I played rank. This is so I understand like what they want to do, what is their general cooldown of their skills. So I know, for example, if I play Violet 3 times, I know like if she just used her Q, she wouldn't have it up for another like 7 seconds at least. So I have 7 seconds to play around her cooldown. So this is really important, tying into just playing around character cooldowns. Of course, a very important skill to know that in laning phase particularly, like if the enemy just used their Q or W, how long do you have before it's up again? Like Blitzcrank, if he just whiffed his hook, you have like over 10 seconds to punish him for it, or to go for a trade without his hook being up. So I play every single character just to understand what they want to do and what are the skill cooldowns and what are the item breakpoints. You guys don't necessarily have to do that, but at least understand what all their abilities do and what they want to achieve in the game. So like Darius, what he wants to achieve 5 stacks onto somebody, anybody, apply the stacks to everybody else and dunk on everybody for a pentakill, or for at least a multi-kill. That's generally what he wants to do. So if you don't allow him to stack, just walk away from him after like 3 stacks. You and your team are going to be fine. But of course some people don't understand that, so they let themselves get stacked upon and their whole team suffers for it. And of course you want to avoid that happening, so you got to understand every character. Now the last couple of points, you want to figure out your win condition. Now this is a little bit of a controversial point, because especially in solo queue, you always want to rely on yourself, unless you're like playing support. But if you're playing like mid lane, jungle, or like AD carry, especially if you're in a carry position, you want to always rely on yourself to carry. So you generally want to be the win condition. So but there are a couple of other times where other people are the win condition. For example, if your Katarina in mid lane is smurfing, she's like 11-0, and you're playing AD carry, you're like 3-3. So you're not doing the worst, you're not doing too bad, but it's obvious that the Katarina is gonna be the one to carry your team. So sometimes you want to play around your win condition. Of course, there is a caveat to this, but I'll get to that later. So you want to play around your win condition, so you want to protect the Katarina at all costs. If you die and the Katarina cleans up the rest of the fight, it's fine. So if you like sacrifice your life for her to get a pentakill, it's worth it. Just do it for the team, do it for the win. After you want to rank up, you don't want to like you're not the KDA player. You just want to get the rank, just get the win. So, of course, the caveat is if you see that they're bad, you may not want to do this. Like for example, if a Yasuo is like 6-0 after like 9 minutes, but you see he's just dashing all over the place. He doesn't know what he's doing. He launched his tornado 1 mile away from the enemy, but yet he's fed. Of course, you may not want to do that because maybe he just got fed by luck and he's not actually that mechanically good. But if you see your Katarina, you're just waiting patiently, going in at the right time, assessing the entire enemy team a couple of times, then you definitely want to play around your Katarina. And also, other win conditions is how else can you win the game? It's not necessarily around the character. Like if enemy team does Baron, can you win by a backdoor? Can you win by a split push? So you got to be aware of the map and understand your win condition. So you just gotta understand, how can you win this game? What are the alternative ways to win the game? It's not necessarily team fight and win. Some teams just want to distract the enemy. They want to split push. They don't want to team fight at all. So there are non-team fight teams, there are split push teams, and so on. So now down to my last 2 points. First point is to use the meta. Now for this, I actually have a playlist of tier list that I have, so I'm gonna link that up in the top for you guys to check out. But generally, you want to play what is meta. Now, it is a little bit disgusting to be a meta slave, and some, there is a little bit of a stigma against it. But you gotta face the fact that it's called meta for a reason. It's most effective tactic available. That's why it's called meta. So whoever is meta, you should be playing if you're serious about ranking up. So for me, I want to rank up. I play AD carry. The best AD carry at the moment is Kai'Sa, so that's my main. And the next two is Xayah and Ezreal, so I'm playing those two as my two secondary AD carries. So you want to just focus on whoever is the best at the moment. If you're playing top lane, as of recording this video, you should be playing Fiora. Fiora is undoubtedly the best top laner at the moment, something like that. So you want to play who's good. If you want to rank up, which champion you're playing doesn't matter. All that matters is getting the win. So you just want to get the win and just play just play the champions that will get you the win. Of course, if like Katarina is meta and you don't want to put in the effort to master Katarina, which there was a point where that was the case, it's understandable, but just know that there are people who will put in that effort to master Katarina, and she is when she was the strongest champion in mid lane and you master her, she is going to be carrying your games, and you are generally just going to be doing better just based on the fact that your character is strong. That's why your character is meta. So just have to understand that and use the meta to your advantage, or ban out the meta characters, or characters you don't want to face, of course. And my last point is also a little bit of a unique point, which is to duo or trio queue, especially with someone better. Of course, with someone better, not necessarily for them to carry you, but so you can learn from them, so you can learn from the macro. Like when I first started out the game, I played duo queue with my friend who was a league PC player for the last 7 years. So he knew the game really well, and mobile is arguably easier than PC. So he knew very well. He taught me, macro. He taught me, when we can fight and when we can't. Like sometimes I was just backing off from fights that we actually win, and he was like, "Why are you backing off? We gotta go in and get the kills." So that was when I realized that, oh, okay, so this fight is actually winnable, and I shouldn't be running away. So things like that. So you want to play them to number one, improve, and number two, it's just simply easier to rank up in duo or trio queues, especially if you're a duo bot lane, like how I usually play with a duo bot lane. Nothing to be ashamed of there. If it helps you rank up, just go for it. Other people are doing it anyway, so you are sort of like me. Even like maybe if you're playing AD carry solo and the enemy team is like a duo, you might be in a disadvantage. So you of course always want to put yourself at advantage. So if possible, just duo or trio queue with your friends, or with someone who you know that is good, if possible. But if not, it's alright to of course solo queue. So with that, just nice as the game ends, I finished all my points on how to improve and rank up at the game. So thank you guys so much for watching the video, guys, and goodbye.